There are moments in life that don't come with a warning. No flashing signs. No dramatic music. Just a quiet shift, and suddenly, everything's different. You're not who you were 5 minutes ago. And you'll never be that person again. For me, it happened in a bathroom. Yeah, a bathroom. The most ordinary place you can think of. But on that day, in that space, something happened that shattered every sense of who I believed I was. And I wasn't prepared. Not for what I saw. Not for what I felt. And definitely, not for what I let happen next. I didn't see it coming. You know, people like to think they're strong. That they have rules, morals, lines they would never, ever cross. But life has a way of finding those weak spots. Those silent moments when you're exhausted, empty, invisible, and it presses right there, where it hurts the most. I used to believe I was a good person. A loyal wife. A decent human being. I still want to believe that. But now? Now I look in the mirror, and I'm not so sure anymore. What happened? It was wrong. It was complicated. And it was nothing I ever expected. I can't tell you how many nights I've laid awake replaying it in my head, asking myself how I got there. How a simple moment turned into something I can't take back. How a young man's gaze made me feel things I didn't even know I'd buried. And before you jump to conclusions. No, this isn't one of those stories that's black and white. There's no neat little box to put it in. Just gray. Endless, murky gray. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust, not exactly. It was attention. It was connection, in a place I didn't even realize was empty. It was something I'm still ashamed to admit made me feel alive. I thought I knew my boundaries. I thought I was in control. But what he did, what I allowed, what I wanted, even if just for a second. God, I still can't believe it. And you know what hurts the most? It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some man I met online. It was someone I saw every day. Someone who called me auntie in front of everyone else. If you think you've heard shocking stories, if you think you've heard the worst that people can do to each other, hold on. Because this one still haunts me. And before you judge me, before you decide who I am or what kind of woman could let something like this happen, I want you to listen. Really listen. Because I know I'm not the only one who's felt invisible. So please, stick around. Hear the whole story before you decide. And if you're brave enough to walk with me through this mess, if you're curious to know how a moment in the bathroom turned my world upside down, then subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga. Because what you're about to hear, it's not just my truth. It's a truth so many people are afraid to speak out loud. And if you've ever felt lost, lonely, or like the person in the mirror wasn't quite you anymore, you're not alone. Not by a long shot. I'm in my late 30s. Not old, but not exactly young anymore either. Most days, I don't feel like a woman. I feel like a task list, a background noise, a placeholder for someone who used to smile without thinking about it. I've been married for 14 years, to a man who, once upon a time, made me feel like the only woman in the room. But now, he barely notices when I leave the room. He used to trace my face with his fingers. Now he scrolls through his phone without even looking up when I speak. He's not cruel. Not violent. Just gone. Physically present, emotionally somewhere else. Always working. Always tired. Always with his back turned to me when he sleeps. I don't remember the last time he reached for me without me having to ask. So I stopped asking. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from sound. It's the silence that creeps into your bones when you start to believe you don't matter anymore. That's where I was. Drifting through the days. Cooking meals no one compliments. Washing clothes no one thanks me for. Existing in a house that feels more like a museum than a home. And then my sister called. She was going through a divorce. Her voice cracked when she asked if she and her son could stay for a while. Of course, I said yes. I've always had a soft spot for her son, my nephew. 19 years old. Smart. Quiet. Sweet, in that awkward boy on the edge of manhood way. He used to run around my backyard with chocolate on his face. Now he was taller than me, with a voice that startled me the first time he spoke again. When they arrived, the house came alive for a moment. The energy shifted. I felt needed again. I cooked meals that someone actually noticed. I laughed. I felt part of something. And my nephew, he was different. Polite. Always saying thank you. Helping carry groceries. Asking if I needed anything. Maybe too polite. Maybe too careful with his eyes. At first, I didn't notice. Or maybe I did, and I just pretended not to. He was always respectful. Always soft-spoken. But every now and then, I felt it. A glance that lingered just a beat too long. A pause in conversation that felt heavy for no reason. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was reading into things because I was lonely. And maybe that's true. Loneliness messes with your mind. It starts to fill in the blanks in ways you wouldn't expect. The house itself didn't help. It's one of those suburban layouts, clean, cold, predictable. Everything in its place. Everyone in their separate corners. Except for the bathroom. The bathroom has always been mine. My little slice of peace. Soft candlelight. Warm towels. A locked door. The only place where no one interrupts. I used to love the silence in the bathroom. But after that day, even silence makes me flinch. Funny how a room can hold your secrets tighter than your heart can. He was staying in the guest room down the hall. I'd see him in the mornings, shirtless sometimes, walking toward the kitchen. Still damp from a shower. Hair messy. Muscles I hadn't remembered him having when he was just a boy. I never looked. Not at first. Then one day I did. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not desire. Not exactly. Just alive. And that scared me more than anything. He wasn't a stranger. He was family. But something in the way he looked at me, it didn't feel like family. And I didn't stop it. I didn't correct him. I didn't draw a line. I smiled. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning. The beginning of everything unraveling. The beginning of me losing who I thought I was. One glance at a time. One silence at a time. And now, when I step into that bathroom, I don't see peace anymore. I see the edge of a cliff I didn't know I was standing on. And the footsteps that followed me there weren't mine alone. It was a quiet evening. The kind that hums along unnoticed, the way most regrets do at first. Dinner was simple, roasted chicken, some rice, a salad. My husband barely spoke, too absorbed in whatever was on his laptop. My sister had a glass of wine in her hand and her pain masked behind a tired smile. My nephew helped me clear the dishes. He didn't say much, just moved beside me with a quiet sort of ease. He carried the plates to the sink, and when our fingers touched as I took one from him, I felt it. That tiny current. That split-second jolt that shouldn't have meant anything. I brushed it off. They moved into the living room. My husband, my sister, my nephew. Laughter floated out in soft bursts. I stayed behind in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't need to be cleaned, just to avoid going in there. I don't know why I felt so off that night. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the ache in my chest that had become so familiar I hardly noticed it anymore. Eventually, I slipped away to the bathroom. I wanted a moment to breathe. To fix my face, maybe. To look at myself in the mirror and pretend I still recognized the woman staring back. I didn't lock the door. I almost always do, but that night I didn't. I don't know why. I leaned over the sink, touching up the corners of my mouth. Soft lighting. Warm tiles. The faint scent of lavender from the candle I kept burning by the window. I was halfway through fixing my hair when the door creaked open behind me. At first, I thought it was my husband. But when I turned, it was him. My nephew. He froze. So did I. There was a moment, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 10, where neither of us moved. Just silence. He stood there in the doorway, eyes wide. And I stood there, hands still in my hair, heart thudding loud enough to echo off the tile. Then I saw it, his eyes. He wasn't looking away. Not fast enough. And something about the way he looked at me. Not like a child seeing an ant. Not like a boy who had made a mistake. But like a man seeing a woman. He stumbled back a step, eyes suddenly darting away. I didn't know anyone was in here. I'm so sorry, he said, voice cracking with nerves. Then he turned and left. Just like that. The door closed. And I was alone again. But not the same. My face was still in the mirror, but everything had changed. I should have said something. Laughed it off. Called it out. Set a boundary. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the reflection of someone who didn't know what to feel. And that's when the thoughts started creeping in. Why didn't I speak up? Why did I freeze? Why did a part of me notice the way he looked at me? And worse, why did a part of me not hate it? I told myself it was nothing. An accident. A misunderstanding. Something to forget. But some things you don't forget. Not because of what happened, but because of what it awakened. And in that silence, in that pause that stretched too long, something shifted. Something that wouldn't go back to sleep. I tried to forget it. I really did. Told myself it was nothing, just a moment. An awkward accident. A kid opening the wrong door. But my mind, it wouldn't let go. That pause. That look. It played in my head like a broken record. Not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Because it was quiet. Simple. Charged in a way that made me question everything. Why did he hesitate? Why didn't he turn away right away? Why did I feel something when he didn't? I told myself I was overthinking. That my loneliness was getting the best of me. That I was just filling in the blanks with things I wanted to believe. But the truth was, I was lonely. So lonely it felt like hunger. And that moment? It was like someone had held out a piece of bread after years of watching everyone else eat. Was I flattered? God, yes. I didn't want to be. But I was. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that. Like I was visible. Like I was something to be seen, not just passed by. My husband didn't notice when I cut my hair 2 weeks ago. Didn't say a word when I changed the way I did my makeup. Didn't even glance up when I came to bed wearing that silk nightgown he used to love. He sleeps facing the wall now, breathing deep and even, while I lie there next to him, wide awake, wondering when I stopped being enough. And my nephew? He was kind. Too kind. Always offering to help. Always watching in this quiet, careful way. He never said anything inappropriate. But it was there. In the way he paused before he left a room. In the way he looked at me a moment too long before turning away. I began putting on makeup more often. Just a little. Just mascara, a hint of blush, some gloss. I told myself it was for me. That I was reclaiming something I'd let go of. That I just wanted to feel good. But deep down, I think I wanted to be noticed. Not by my husband. I'd given up on that a long time ago. But by someone. By him. I hated myself for it. But I craved it too. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about him, really. It was about feeling like a woman again. And every time he glanced at me, every time his voice softened when he asked how my day was, it chipped away at the wall I'd tried so hard to keep standing. I started waiting for it. For the look. For the subtle shift in his eyes when we passed each other in the hallway. I started wondering if he was thinking about that moment in the bathroom, too. And one day, I caught him staring again. This time, I didn't look away either. After that day, everything changed. Not all at once, but in tiny moments. Small shifts in rhythm. Little things that seemed harmless until they weren't. The next morning, I walked past him in the hallway. He looked up from his phone, and his eyes met mine for just a second too long. Not in an accidental way. In a way that said we both remember. I didn't say a word, but my body, it responded before I had time to think. My stomach fluttered. My breath caught. That was the start. The next few days were full of moments that didn't belong in an ordinary home. Moments that built on top of each other like kindling stacked around a slow-burning flame. One afternoon, I handed him a towel from the laundry basket. Our fingers touched. Just barely. But neither of us moved right away. It wasn't the touch itself. It was the pause after. Like the silence had started saying things we weren't ready to admit out loud. Another day, he walked by me while I was pouring coffee. He said, "You smell really nice today." Softly. Too softly. Low enough that no one else could have heard. I didn't say thank you. But I didn't forget it. I started lingering in rooms I used to leave. I waited until he was in the kitchen to refill my water. I slowed my pace walking down the hallway, hoping he'd come out of his room at just the right time. And then there were the jogs. He'd started going out in the evenings, running through the neighborhood. Sweat on his skin, shirt slung over his shoulder. The first time I saw him like that, really saw him, I felt shame burn under my skin. But I didn't look away. I told myself it was innocent. That noticing wasn't a crime. But my thoughts, they weren't innocent anymore. Not really. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to make tea wearing my silk robe. The one I hadn't worn in a long time. The one that always made me feel like I was still something. He was already in the kitchen. The room was dim. Just the light over the stove humming quietly. He turned, surprised, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. I pulled the robe tighter. He looked away, but not fast enough. We didn't speak. I poured my tea. He rinsed his glass. But the air was thick, like it could snap if either of us breathed too hard. Nothing happened. But everything could have. And that was almost worse. The bathroom started to feel different, too. I used to find peace there. But now, it felt like the air had changed. Like the walls were holding secrets I hadn't meant to share. One afternoon, I was in the shower. Steam curling up around me, water pounding on my back, my eyes closed. And then I heard it. A knock. A soft one. Then silence. Then, the door handle shifted. I froze. I didn't say anything. The handle stopped moving and then his voice, sorry. I thought it was empty. His voice was quiet. But not nervous. Not surprised. Hopeful. Like maybe he wanted it to be empty. Or maybe he wanted me to invite him in. He walked away. And I stood there, soaking wet, heart racing, wondering why I didn't feel angry. Wondering why a part of me wanted him to try again. The thoughts in my head were no longer innocent. They'd grown darker, heavier, more vivid. I started asking myself questions I had no business asking. Does he think about me when I'm not around? Does he remember the way I looked in the mirror that day? Does he want this as much as I do? Every look. Every silence. Every almost touch, it was all building. And then, it happened. He followed me into the bathroom again. But this time, he didn't leave. It was a rainy afternoon. The kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, and the whole house feels like it's holding its breath. Everyone was asleep. My husband had drifted off on the couch, half snoring, the TV murmuring in the background. My sister had gone to lie down, headache, she said. The kind that comes from years of disappointment. The house was still, quiet in that eerie, almost sacred way. Like something was about to happen, but you didn't know what. I went upstairs, barefoot, the wood cool under my feet. I wasn't thinking about anything, really. Just wanted to freshen up. Maybe splash water on my face. Maybe hide for a minute in the only room where I could still hear myself think. I opened the bathroom door, and he was already in there. Standing near the sink. Changing. Half-dressed. He froze. So did I. His shirt was in his hand. His body still damp from the shower, towel riding low on his hips. We looked at each other. Neither of us moved. Not a word. Not a sound. Just the rhythm of the rain tapping against the window. And the rise and fall of our breath. I should have turned around. Should have said something. Should have walked away like none of this meant anything. But I didn't. He didn't either. He reached for the towel hanging beside me, slowly, deliberately. Our hands brushed. I didn't pull away. I could feel the heat of his skin before he even touched me. I could feel my heart pounding, not in fear, but in something I didn't want to name. He stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to feel. The mirror behind us began to fog. A soft, whispering haze forming on the glass, blurring the edges of what was real and what was already too far gone. Everything inside me screamed to stop, to say something, to remind myself who I was. But my body betrayed me. It leaned forward when it should have stepped back. It welcomed the warmth when it should have recoiled from it. I could have stopped it, but I didn't. And what happened next? I've never told anyone. Not because I'm trying to protect him. Not even because I'm trying to protect myself. but because when I think back to that moment, the quiet, the closeness, the way he looked at me like I was everything and nothing all at once. I don't know who I became in that room. When I looked at myself in the mirror afterward, I didn't recognize that woman. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't an aunt. She wasn't even a person I could explain. She was just there, raw, unraveled, exposed. And the worst part? A part of me didn't want to look away. The next morning, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful, hollow. Like someone had taken all the air and left the silence behind. I moved through the kitchen like I always do, coffee, toast, small noises that felt too loud. My hands were steady. My face held. But inside, I was shaking. I didn't sleep the night before. Just lay there in bed beside a man who had no idea the person he married was no longer the person breathing next to him. He didn't notice. He never does. My sister came in, yawning, rubbing her temples like the pain in her head had followed her from yesterday. She looked at me for a little too long. Didn't say anything. But her eyes narrowed just slightly, like she could feel something shifting beneath the surface, even if she couldn't name it. And then he walked in. My nephew. He didn't say good morning. Didn't even look at me. Just grabbed a glass of water, kept his eyes low, and left without a word. The tension hit like a slap. Sudden, sharp, silent. He didn't have to say anything. His distance spoke for him. There was a wall now. One I hadn't seen him build, but one I could feel with every step. I told myself maybe I imagined it. That maybe he was the one filled with guilt. That maybe if I just smiled, acted normal, we could pretend it hadn't happened. I tried. I cracked eggs. Made breakfast. Laughed when my sister made a joke about our childhood. I answered my husband's questions about laundry and bills and schedules, but my skin felt too tight. My ears were ringing. And every time I passed the mirror, I avoided my own reflection. I kept waiting for something to happen, for him to say something, to slip, to apologize, to acknowledge me in some way. But he didn't. He just faded. Stopped lingering near the kitchen. Stopped helping with dishes. Stopped finding reasons to stay in the same room. He started going outside more. Running longer. Sitting in the backyard with his earbuds in, staring at nothing. And I felt like a ghost in my own life. I started flinching every time I stepped into the bathroom. Like the walls might whisper back at me. Like the mirror would show more than just my face. I cleaned it twice that week. Scrubbed the sink, wiped the tiles, burned every candle I had left. But the air still felt heavy. Like something sacred had been broken in there, and no amount of lavender could cover the scent of guilt. I kept watching him. Not on purpose. Just noticing how quiet he'd become. How careful. How far away he suddenly felt. And then one morning, he was gone. Just like that. My sister told me he had left early to go back to his father's house. Didn't want to wait for the weekend. Didn't even tell her he was leaving until the night before. She thought it was just teen angst. Post-divorce stress. I nodded. Tried to pretend I didn't already know what it really was. He left, without saying goodbye. I sit alone now, more often than I used to. Not because I don't have things to do, God knows the list never ends. But because when I stop moving, the silence creeps back in. And lately, I think I need to hear it. To face it. To stop pretending I can outrun it. Because it's there, always. Every time I close my eyes. Every time I walk past that hallway. Every time I see the faint smudge on the bathroom mirror that never quite goes away. I keep asking myself, who was I in that moment? The villain? The victim? Both? I replay it over and over, trying to pinpoint the exact second the line blurred so badly I couldn't see it anymore. Was it the look in his eyes? The way he lingered? The way I lingered? Or was it deeper than that? Did I seduce him? Did I want that attention? Did I really crave being seen so badly that I was willing to ignore the cost? Or had I just been invisible for so long that even the faintest recognition felt like oxygen? I don't know. I wish I could tell you I've figured it out. That there's some neat explanation, some reason that would make it all make sense. But there isn't. There's just this ache. This dull, persistent ache in my chest. Like something inside me was opened up and never quite closed again. I thought about telling my husband. God, I thought about it. I imagined the scene in my head 1,000 times, me sitting across from him, voice shaking, hands clasped, trying to explain something I don't even fully understand. But what would I say? That I let his nephew touch me? That I welcomed it? That the silence between us had grown so loud, I reached for someone just to feel human again? No, that would destroy everything. And for what? To punish myself? To burn the last thing I have left? So I said nothing. I stayed quiet. I acted like the woman I used to be. Some days I almost believe it. I almost sent a message to him once. Just a short one. Are you okay? That's all I typed. But I stared at the screen for so long my phone went dark. And then I deleted it. Another night I wrote a letter. I didn't know who it was for, him, me, maybe no one at all. I poured everything into it. Every thought. Every guilt-soaked feeling. Every truth I couldn't carry anymore. And when I finished, I folded it, walked outside, and burned it. Watched the flames eat the edges, curl the corners, turn my confession into ash. It didn't make me feel better, but it made it real. Sometimes I still go into that bathroom. I sit on the edge of the tub. Lights off. Candle lit. I close my eyes and try to remember who I was before all this. But the silence there. It's not peaceful anymore. It's full of echoes. Soft. Lingering. Unrelenting. The bathroom is quiet again. But I hear echoes I can't silence. Have you ever crossed a line you swore you never would? Not in some loud, reckless way. But slowly, silently. One tiny step at a time, until suddenly you're standing somewhere you don't even recognize? Have you ever felt pulled toward someone you knew you shouldn't even notice? Not because you wanted to fall, but because falling felt better than staying numb? I know what I did was wrong. But I also know what it feels like to be invisible. To reach for something, someone, just to remember what it means to be alive. To be wanted. To be seen. I'm not proud. But I'm not pretending either. Tell me in the comments. If this was you, if you were sitting where I'm sitting now, what would you do? Would you confess? Would you destroy everything in the name of truth? Or would you carry the silence like a scar no one sees? Would you call it weakness? Or just being human? I don't know anymore. All I know is, it happened. And it changed me. If you've ever felt something you weren't supposed to, if you've ever held a secret that felt heavier than guilt itself, you're not alone. Subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga for more stories like this, stories that peel back the layers of what we hide and what we can't help but feel. Because behind every perfect picture, every quiet smile, there's a truth we're not always ready to say out loud. And sometimes, the real betrayal isn't what you do. It's how easily you justify it, just to feel seen.